The room did not go quiet when my father cut the pie. It went quiet when my son realized there was nothing left for him. I am Megan Whitmore. I am 34 years old, divorced, raising my 8-year-old son on my own, and I have spent most of my adult life pretending I did not notice the way my family measured love. They measured it in obedience, in silence, in who made them look good at the table. That Thanksgiving, my son learned it too. He had helped set the dessert plates. He was still smiling when my father looked at the tray, looked at him, and said he did not earn any after the way he acted. My sister's children already had their slices. One of them was asking for seconds before my son even understood what had happened. He had not yelled. He had not broken anything. He had gotten excited in the backyard and talked too loudly about a football game. That was all. The worst part was not what my father said. It was the way my son lowered his eyes and whispered, "It is okay, Mom," like he was the one supposed to make this easier for me. So I did the only thing that still felt honest. I took his coat off the back of the chair, helped him into it, thanked no one, and walked him out to the car. I drove home, made him hot chocolate, and let him eat the cookies we had baked the night before. At 10:13 that night, my phone lit up with a text from my father telling me to be at the credit union in the morning to transfer the mortgage. I did not argue. By sunrise, I was already setting in motion the one thing he never believed I would do. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me this. Would you have stayed polite for the sake of family? Or walked out the second your child was taught that love had to be earned? I wish I could say that was the first time my father had done something cruel enough to shock me, but it was not. What made that day different was that he finally did it to my son in a way I could not explain away. My father, Douglas Whitmore, has always believed that being needed gives him the right to control people. If he pays, advises, signs, rescues, or fixes, then in his mind he owns part of the decision forever. My mother, Elaine, has spent years smoothing over the damage with soft voices and polished excuses. She never starts the fire, but she is very good at telling everyone else the smoke is not real. After my divorce 4 years earlier, I rebuilt my life from the ground up. I found steady work as a customer success manager for a healthcare software company. I learned how to stretch every paycheck. I bought a small house in Highlands Ranch with a fenced yard and a kitchen that always felt too narrow until Noah and I were laughing in it. The only reason I got that mortgage approved when I did was because my father agreed to co-sign. At the time, I told myself it was just paperwork. I told myself I could take the help and still keep my distance. That was my mistake. With my father, help is never just help. It is a receipt he plans to cash later. A few months after I closed on the house, he started talking about structure and protection and long-term planning. He wanted to fold my home into a larger family arrangement he managed. He said it would make everything easier one day. What he meant was that he wanted my future filed somewhere under his name. I said no as politely as I could. He smiled when I said it, but something changed after that. Since then, every bill I paid on my own, every repair I handled without him, every small sign that I could live without his oversight seemed to offend him more than any argument ever had. My sister Vanessa fit more comfortably into the version of family my parents liked to display. She was easy in the right rooms, agreeable at the right times, and her children knew how to perform gratitude on cue. My son was different. Noah was thoughtful and observant, and honest in the way children are before the world teaches them to edit themselves. He asked questions. He noticed unfairness. He did not flatter adults just because they were older. My father called that attitude. My mother called it sensitivity. I called it being 8. My older brother Grant saw more than he said. He worked in lending, understood exactly how people use money to build pressure, and once told me something I never forgot. Dad only respects the people he can still steer. That was the real problem. I had stopped letting him steer me. Thanksgiving was not about pie. It was not even about favoritism. It was about my father reminding me that in his house, affection was still something he believed he had the right to award or withhold. What he did not understand yet was that once he did that to Noah, I stopped caring whether he ever approved of me again. 2 days later, Noah had a Saturday soccer game, and I almost did not go. Part of me wanted to stay home and avoid everyone, because once something like that happens in a family, people start choosing sides even when they pretend they are staying neutral. But Noah wanted to play, so I packed orange slices, grabbed a folding chair, and drove him to the field. It was cold enough that parents kept their hands wrapped around coffee cups and talked through scarves. Noah ran onto the grass like nothing had happened. That was what children do when they still trust the adults around them to carry the heavier part. Grant showed up halfway through the first quarter with his youngest beside him and a coffee in each hand. He sat down next to me without saying much at first. He watched Noah play. He clapped when Noah stole the ball clean and sent it downfield. Then, when the kids broke for halftime and wandered toward the benches, he asked me what really happened at Thanksgiving. Not what Mom said happened. Not whether Noah had been disrespectful. What really happened. So I told him. I told him about the dessert plates. I told him what Dad said. I told him how Noah whispered that it was okay, like he had already learned that being hurt quietly was the easiest way to survive in our family. Grant did not interrupt me. He just stared out at the field for a second and shook his head once. Then he said something I had not heard from anyone in my family in a very long time. "Tell me what you want me to do." I looked at him because I was not even sure I understood the question. Most people ask what happened so they can measure whether your pain is reasonable. Grant was asking what came next. I told him the truth. I was done. Done pretending it was a misunderstanding. Done accepting apologies that never sounded like apologies. Done letting our parents use money and access in family events like they were levers. I said I wanted out of anything with strings on it. The mortgage, the shared accounts, the polite little expectations that I would still show up smiling at Christmas after my son had been humiliated at Thanksgiving. Grant nodded like he had already been waiting for me to say exactly that. He told me he would help me figure out what was tied to what and who needed to be called first. He also told me something else. Dad had already started talking. Apparently, he had been telling people I was overreacting and that Noah had been acting wild all afternoon. Wild. That was the word he chose for an 8-year-old who got excited in the backyard. I laughed when Grant said it, but it was the kind of laugh that only comes when something is so insulting it becomes absurd. After the game, Noah ran over with red cheeks and grass on his socks, asking if he could get burgers with his cousins. I said yes, because I wanted him to have one normal hour before the adults ruined something else. That night, after I tucked him into bed, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. She had sent a photo of Vanessa's kids at the table from Thanksgiving, both of them smiling with dessert forks in their hands. Under the picture, she wrote, "Maybe next time Noah will remember his manners." I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then I deleted the photo, blocked her number for the night, and opened my laptop. If they were going to turn this into a story about me being emotional, then I was going to become the calmest person in the room. I started writing everything down, every comment, every threat disguised as concern, every time money had shown up right after disobedience. I was not doing it for revenge yet. I was doing it because for the first time in my life, I wanted a record that told the truth. The first week of December, my mother sent one of her group emails. She always did that when she wanted to restore order without admitting anything had gone wrong. The subject line was Christmas plans, with enough cheer in the punctuation to make it look like warmth instead of control. She listed everything the way she always did. Dinner at 4. Matching sweaters for pictures at 6. Vanessa would bring the sweet potatoes. Grant was supposed to bring wine. I was assigned dinner roles, as if my place in the family could still be measured by what I carried through the front door. There was not one line about Thanksgiving, not one word about Noah, no mention of why we had left early, or why no one had heard from me since. At the bottom, she wrote that the holidays were a time to let go of old tensions and come together for the grandchildren. I read that line twice. She could not even say his name. I did not answer. I did not need to. Silence had started doing more work for me than explanations ever had. 3 days later, a certified envelope showed up at my front door just before dinner. Noah was at the kitchen table working on a school project with glue on his fingers and construction paper spread everywhere. I signed for the envelope, set it on the counter, and waited until he went upstairs to wash his hands before I opened it. Inside was a letter from an accountant my father had used for years, along with a typed note from him clipped to the front. The accountant's letter was polished and cold. It warned against emotionally driven decisions that could trigger unnecessary tax exposure and damage long-term family equity. My father's note was shorter. He had underlined one sentence in blue ink as if I might miss the point. Temporary anger should not be allowed to create permanent consequences. I stood there in my kitchen reading that line while the oven timer went off behind me. My son had been humiliated at their table, and this was what mattered to him: equity, exposure, consequences, not Noah's face, not the fact that an 8-year-old had walked out of his grandparents' house hungry and pretending he was fine. I took a picture of the letter and sent it to Grant. He called me 5 minutes later. He did not waste time asking if I was okay. He had already moved past that. He asked what else had happened since the soccer game. I told him about Mom's text. I read Dad's note out loud. He went quiet for a second and then said, "They are leaning this hard because they still think they have leverage." Hearing it said, that plainly made something settle in me. He was right. This was not guilt. It was strategy. That same night, just after dark, someone knocked on my front door. Not once. 3 sharp knocks, spaced like a demand. I looked through the peephole and saw my father standing there with his hands in his coat pockets, staring straight ahead like a man waiting to inspect something he already believed belonged to him. I did not open the door. He knocked again, harder this time. Upstairs, I heard Noah's footsteps pause in the hallway. He called down and asked who it was. "Nobody important," I said. I meant it more than I expected to. My father stood there another full minute before walking back to his car. I watched him go without moving. I was not shaking. I was not crying. For the first time, I was not trying to figure out how to fix the moment before it spread. I was letting it mean exactly what it meant. The next morning, Vanessa texted me. She said Mom was upset and Dad felt blindsided, and maybe I was making too much of a holiday misunderstanding. I stared at the message and thought about all the years that one word had covered for people: misunderstanding. As if cruelty became harmless when the person delivering it claimed good intentions, I wrote back with one question. Did either of you ask why my son left your parents' house without dessert and without an apology? She never answered. Later that afternoon, Grant called again. His voice sounded different this time, more focused, like he had found the edge of something solid. He told me he had started pulling old records and property documents tied to the family accounts, just to see what else our father had tucked behind polished language and professional advice. Then he said, if he still thinks he holds the only pressure point in this family, he may be about to learn otherwise. Grant came over the next evening after Noah went upstairs to shower. He had a manila folder under one arm and the kind of expression people get when they have found something ugly hiding in plain sight. He did not sit down right away. He set the folder on my kitchen table, pulled out 3 documents, and spread them in front of me like he wanted me to see the whole thing before he said a word. The first page was a closing statement from 2018. The second was a copy of a deed. The third was an email chain between Dad and a realtor in Florida. I looked at my own name on the deed before my brain fully caught up. Megan Whitmore, 40% interest, Naples, Florida. I remember feeling almost detached for a second, like I was reading somebody else's paperwork. Then Grant pointed to the signature line and said, "You were never taken off." He explained it slowly. Years ago, when Dad wanted help with the down payment on that condo, I had contributed a large chunk from the divorce settlement I was trying so hard to protect. He had called it a smart family investment, temporary paperwork, a way to make the numbers work faster. Later, he told me he would clean it all up once the loan stabilized. I believed him because back then I was still making the mistake of assuming his promises and his plans were the same thing. They were not. According to the documents in front of me, I was still a legal co-owner, which meant he could not sell it, lease it long-term, transfer it, or refinance it without my knowledge and my signature. Grant slid the email printout closer. Dad was already in talks to list it after New Year's. He wanted the money for retirement restructuring, whatever that meant this week. "No call to you," Grant said. "No buyout, no disclosure." He was just going to move it and hope nobody looked too closely until it was done. I stared at the paperwork and felt something colder than anger settle into place. Thanksgiving had been about humiliation. The mortgage text had been about control. This was greed. Quiet, practiced, shameless greed. Grant asked me one question. "Do you want to block the sale?" I did not even need a second to think. "Absolutely," I said. He nodded once, like he had expected that answer all along. For the next hour, we worked at my kitchen table while Noah watched a movie upstairs and the dishwasher hummed in the background. Grant gave me the contact information for the realtor, the title company, and the attorney copied on the listing documents. I drafted one email and then another. I attached the deed. I stated clearly that I had not consented to any sale, transfer, or commercial use of the property and would not be signing anything. I was careful with every sentence. No emotion, no insults, just facts, dates, and proof. When I hit send, I expected to feel triumphant. What I actually felt was steady, like I was finally speaking a language my father could not brush aside with tone policing and family guilt. The response came faster than I expected. Less than 2 hours later, my phone started ringing. Dad called once, then again, then 3 more times in a row. I let every call go to voicemail. A few minutes after that, Mom called. I ignored hers too. Then the voicemail notifications started landing one after another. Her first message was calm in that eerie, rehearsed way she used when she still thought she could talk me back into position. She said there had clearly been a misunderstanding and that I needed to stop reacting before I created unnecessary damage. In the second message, she sounded tighter. She said I had no idea how complicated these arrangements were and that Dad had always acted in the family's best interest. By the third voicemail, the mask was gone. Her voice sharpened and she said, I was sabotaging everyone's future over one holiday incident. Then she said the part that made me save the message instead of deleting it. She said Noah needed to learn respect and that I was raising him to be entitled if I kept defending behavior like that. I stood there in my kitchen listening to her say it twice. Not sorry, not ashamed, certain. That was what mattered. She still believed they had been right. I forwarded the voicemail to Grant with no comment. He replied less than a minute later. They're done. Dad called one more time after midnight. This time he left a message himself. He did not ask how Noah was. He did not explain the condo. He said I was making a very serious mistake and that family assets were not mine to interfere with just because I was upset. I listened to it once and actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because for the first time he sounded like a man realizing the locks had changed while he was still reaching for the door. The next morning, the realtor replied and confirmed that all activity on the property had been paused, pending clarification of ownership and consent. I read the email twice, then set my phone down and looked out the kitchen window at the frost on the yard. It was the first real sign that something had shifted. My father had spent years treating money like a leash. He had just learned it could snap back in his face. And judging by the silence that followed that morning, I knew he was not planning to take the loss quietly. Dad did not call again for 3 days, which in my family was the closest thing to a storm warning. Silence from him was never surrender. It was regrouping. The next move came on New Year's Day at 5:41 in the evening, while Noah and I were still in the car, halfway to Grant's house with a bakery box of cupcakes balanced on the seat between us. Grant had told me earlier that week he wanted to keep his birthday quiet this year. Just family he chose, not family that performed. No big dinner, no speeches, no pretending. That was why the notification on my phone felt wrong the second I saw it. My mother had posted a photo on Facebook of my parents' living room dressed up like a magazine spread. Candles lit, gold streamers over the fireplace, 2 long tables arranged with food, a banner taped across the mantel that said, "Happy Birthday, Grant." The caption read, "We could not let this day pass without celebrating the son who keeps this family strong." She tagged Grant. She tagged Vanessa. She tagged Vanessa's children. She did not tag me. She did not tag Noah. I called Grant before I had fully finished reading it. He picked up on the first ring and all he said was, "What did they do now?" I told him about the post. He was quiet for half a second. Then I heard his wife in the background asking what was wrong. He said they had not told him. They had not asked. They had not even mentioned anyone was coming over. My parents had just built a party around his name and put it online like he would fall into place out of habit. By the time Noah and I got to his house, Grant was pacing in his driveway with his coat unzipped and his jaw clenched so hard I could see it from the curb. His phone kept buzzing with messages from distant relatives and neighbors asking where to park, what time cake was being cut, whether they should bring wine. His wife looked furious in that controlled way people do when they are trying not to scare their children. The kids were confused. They had heard the word party and did not understand why they were not excited. Grant looked at me the second I got out of the car and said, "We are going." I asked if he was sure. He nodded once and said, "They do not get to use me to stage forgiveness they never earned." We drove there in 2 cars. Noah stayed with Grant's wife and the other kids for a few minutes while we went inside first. I did not want him walking into something ugly before I knew what shape it would take. The house was already full when we arrived. I recognized 2 of my mother's church friends, one of Dad's golf buddies, a few cousins, and a couple neighbors who had clearly shown up believing this was a normal family celebration. My mother saw us first. Her smile came too quickly, bright and brittle, and she lifted a hand like she thought we had walked into a surprise she could still control. My father was near the dining room with a drink in his hand, speaking to someone in that confident voice he used when he wanted to sound like the most reasonable man in the room. Grant did not let either of them start. He stepped forward and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, "Why is there a birthday party in my name that I did not plan, did not approve, and did not know about until it was already on Facebook?" Conversations stopped the way they do when people sense truth is about to make things inconvenient. My mother tried to laugh it off. She said they only wanted to do something nice and that families should not need permission to celebrate each other. Grant did not even look at her. He looked at the people around us and said, "This is not a family celebration. This is damage control." My father set his glass down and told him not to make a scene. That was when I finally spoke. I said, "You made the scene at Thanksgiving when you told my 8-year-old son he had not earned dessert, then tried to pressure me with the mortgage that same night, and then tried to sell Florida property you do not fully own. You do not get to host a party and act confused about why people stopped trusting you." The room went still. Not polite still, real still. the kind where everyone is suddenly aware they may have walked into the wrong house on the wrong night. One of my cousins actually turned to my father and asked, "Wait, is that true about the condo?" He opened his mouth, but Grant cut in before he could shape the story. He said it was true, that the sale had already been paused, that there were documents, and that our parents were not being attacked. They were being stopped. My mother started talking fast then, saying private family matters were being twisted and that I had become vindictive. My father said I was unstable and emotional and trying to punish everyone over a misunderstanding. I looked straight at him and said, Noah was hungry, humiliated, and quiet because he already knew nobody there was going to stand up for him. There was no misunderstanding. There was just finally a consequence. That landed harder than anything else. Maybe because it was simple. Maybe because nobody in the room could pretend they had not seen children absorb cruelty before. My mother's face changed first. Not into guilt, into panic. She looked around and realized no one was smiling anymore. One of her friends picked up her purse. Dad's golf buddy muttered something about heading out. A cousin whispered to his wife that they should probably go. The room did not explode. It emptied. That was worse. My father took one step toward Grant and told him he was turning his back on his blood. Grant answered in a voice so calm it almost sounded tired. "No, Dad. I am turning my back on the lie that blood excuses everything." Then he turned and walked out. I followed him without looking back. When we reached the driveway, the cold air hit my face so hard it felt clean. Grant exhaled once and looked at me like something inside him had finally locked into place. Behind us, through the front windows, I could see my parents standing in the middle of their perfect party with too much food, too much light, and no control left at all. 3 days after the birthday party, I woke up to an email from the trust administrator with Grant copied on it. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The subject line was dry and professional, but the message underneath it was the cleanest thing I had read in weeks. The family holdings had been formally separated. Anything tied to my name was now under my sole control. Any future distributions connected to my share would move without my parents anywhere in the chain. There was also a note from Grant. Just one line at the bottom. They cannot use access as leverage anymore. I sat there at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold in my hand and read that sentence twice. Not because I did not understand it, but because I had spent so many years living inside their pressure that freedom looked unreal when it finally arrived in writing. My refinance was already moving forward. The condo sale was frozen. The party they had staged to restore their image had collapsed in front of half the people they wanted to impress. For the first time in my life, my parents were the ones running out of moves. Grant called an hour later and said the same thing I had already started to feel. They will come to your door. He was right. At 4:17 that afternoon, there was a knock. Just one at first, then another. Not loud. Not angry, careful. I looked through the peephole and saw both of them standing on the porch, not close to the door this time, almost like they understood they were no longer walking up to something they had a right to enter. I opened it, but I did not step outside. My mother tried first. She gave me the kind of smile people wear when they know warmth alone will not save them. She asked if we could talk for a minute. I said, "About what?" My father answered that one. He said this was family, and family should not be handled through lawyers and emails and public embarrassment. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked him why a man who used a mortgage like a threat and a property deed like a secret weapon suddenly had a problem with paperwork. He looked away for half a second. My mother stepped in again and said things had gotten out of hand. She said no one wanted this. She said they were prepared to apologize to Noah. That word prepared told me everything I needed to know. It was still a performance to them. Still an exchange. still something they could offer now that it might buy back access. I asked her what exactly she planned to say. She opened her mouth and then stopped. My father said I had blown one Thanksgiving comment into something bigger than it ever needed to be. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left in the conversation worth saving. Even now, standing on my porch after losing control of the trust, the condo, the narrative, and half their audience, he still wanted to shrink what he had done to a comment. Not humiliation, not cruelty. Not a child learning to go hungry quietly so adults could stay comfortable. Just a comment. I told him that was the problem. He still thought the damage was my reaction, not his behavior. My mother started crying then, but even that felt oddly distant to me. I had spent too many years softening myself every time she did that. This time, I just stood there and let the silence hold. Then I said the only thing that mattered. Noah is not going to grow up believing love has to be earned from people who enjoy withholding it. You are not a legacy I need to preserve for him. You are a lesson I intend to protect him from. My father flinched harder at that than he had at anything said in the living room on New Year's Day. My mother whispered my name like I was the one leaving something broken behind. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten them. I did not give them one more opening to argue from. I told them I hoped they meant it when they said they wanted to change, but they would have to do it somewhere far away from my son. Then I closed the door. No dramatic ending. No shouting through the wood. Just the click of the lock and my own breathing in the quiet house. That night, Noah and I went to Grant's place for dinner. Nothing formal. Just chili on the stove, cornbread, and the kind of tired laughter that only shows up after something heavy has finally passed through. Grant's kids had made a fort in the living room. Noah disappeared into it within 5 minutes, and soon I could hear all of them arguing over a board game like normal children with normal problems. Later, after dinner, Grant's wife set a pie on the counter and handed Noah the first slice without hesitation. It was such a small thing that it nearly undid me. He took the plate, smiled, and said, "Thank you," in that absent-minded way kids do when kindness still feels natural to them. No one asked whether he had earned it. No one made him perform for it. No one watched him to see if he deserved more. He was just a child at a table where people were glad he was there. I think that was when the full truth of it landed for me. The real revenge was never going to be making my parents feel exactly what they had made me feel. People like that rarely let pain teach them anything. The real revenge was refusing to hand them another generation to shape. It was ending the pattern where control dressed up as help, where cruelty hid behind family language, where children learned to shrink themselves to keep adults comfortable. The weeks that followed were quiet, not empty, peaceful. My father did not call. My mother sent one long email about forgiveness and regret, and how families should not let pride win. But there was still no clean ownership in it, no plain sentence that admitted what had been done to Noah. I did not answer. I did not need to. My answer was already visible in the life we were building without them. Noah slept better. I slept better. The house felt lighter. And when I look back now, that is the part I carry with me. Not the pie, not the text, not even the moment they stood on my porch and realized the old methods no longer worked. What I carry is the certainty that protecting a child is sometimes less about teaching them to be strong and more about showing them that love with conditions is not love at all. Some people call it cutting off family. I call it telling the truth with your life.